and welcome to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And it's July. Happy full summer vacation probably for
Hot,
everybody.
hot, hot. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God.
Happy Megan's birthday month.
Woo. Oh, whatever. It's fine. I'm not a big birthday
All
person.
you cancers out there, this one's for you.
Yeah, this one's for you. You know who you are. I don't know anything about astrology, so I can't speak to like what you're supposed to be like as a human being, but here we are.
Crabby?
I don't even think that's true. It would make sense, though.
Sometimes.
I'm crabby.
Yeah, especially when you're hungry.
Yeah. I don't know.
Although I am too.
Yeah, that's true. So, I don't know. Who knows, guys? It doesn't matter.
Anywho.
It doesn't matter. We're not here to talk about astrology. We're here to talk about theater.
Theater.
The theater. The theater.
The theater.
The theater. That's our theme for the month of July, in case you hadn't picked up on that. It's really, we're hitting full summer now, and in like a lot of larger cities and even some sort of outlying areas, this is like theater season. These are like
really
the seasons
is.
through which like Shakespeare in the Park runs everywhere. If you're in our corner of the world in Canada, Stratford in Ontario has this massive repercussion theater festival that runs from the months of May through October. And this is like July, August are like their big high season right now. Niagara on the Lake has the Shaw Festival that runs as well, that has several productions running throughout the course of the summer. Montreal, our area anyway, has Shakespeare in the Park productions. We've got a lot of different like smaller theaters throughout the city that do different productions. If you go over to Toronto, it's like a whole other story of the number of things that they've got going on over there. And it just feels like it's the time of year where you experience stuff like that. It's warm outside, so watching like outdoor productions is easy to do.
I think it's also like that, you know, when you're nowadays, because we're so immersed in like movies and all that.
Yeah.
Watching like theater, it requires a little bit of whimsy and stuff, and so I just find that like summertime you're a little bit more in the mood to like
I agree.
tune in and kind of abandon all you know, kind of recognition of it being something that's happening, and you have to use your imagination a little bit more,
Yeah,
you
you
know?
have to, you know, your attention span needs to actually like function a little bit better at like if you're watching a theater production kind of thing. So we figured we'd kick things off by actually having kind of a talk about that sort of, I guess, what the pros and cons are, let's say, and the differences are majorly in watching a stage play versus a film, and kind of what you get out of both of those things, because they both have different positives and they both have different negatives to a certain extent, right? And I think that there's a lot to kind of dig into that way with sort of like what we like and what we don't like about both aspects of it.
Right.
Anyway, before we kick that off, though, Shireen, what's on your nightstand right now?
I just finished reading The Wish by Nicholas Sparks. I think it was released in 2021. I love a good Nicholas Sparks in the summer.
Shireen is a full, like during the summer, she's like, give me romance, give me one or two thrillers in there, and that's my whole reading list for the whole summer.
Like, give me some Nicholas Sparks.
Yeah,
because
it's the only time of year where I'll see her read Nicholas Sparks ever is during the summer. The rest of the year, she's like, no, why the fuck would I be reading that right now? It's January, Megan.
It's so true, but when summer comes around, I'm like, I've got my stack.
She picks up like 3 of them, and she's like, I haven't read these ones yet. So funny.
So I just read The Wish. To my dismay, it takes place in the winter.
Oh shit, really?
Yeah, it's all around like Christmas time, and it like kind of flips back and forth. The main character is telling her story. She's at the end of her life. She's not very old, but she's been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and doesn't have very long to live past Christmas. Okay. And she's lived her entire life as a photographer. She's been very successful, and she finds herself confiding her entire life story to this young man who works with her, Mark. She doesn't really know him. He's, I think, in his early 20s. And basically she explains that when she was, I want to say 15 or 16, she got pregnant. She got sent away to a very small town, like near North Carolina, to live with her aunt.
Isn't it all?
Isn't it always? To live with her aunt and give birth to this baby. And, you know, it's just basically the story of her being terrified and not really knowing what to do. She decides very early that she's going to give it up for adoption. again, Nicholas Sparks, there's always like that like Christianity twang added to things.
I mean,
yeah.
There's an undertone there.
Yeah. But it's a sweet story. She meets a boy while she's out there, and even though she's like heavily pregnant, like they fall in love. Anyway, I'm not gonna give away the ending, but voila. So not a bad one, I would say, just a little slow.
Okay.
And I found that the characters, I wasn't like that enamored with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
At some point or another, we need to like write for the blog or something. You need to write like your definitive list of ranking of all the books, because I've never read any of the books, and I know we've talked about the films in the past, but like I've never read any of the books, so I can't speak to anything about any of them. But yeah, that's it. But I feel like you've read so many of them that I'm like, Shireen needs to put forth like a definitive list of
the best,
what the best to the worst is, basically.
I still have 2 more that I've got on my shelf to read this summer.
Well, there you go, and you'll get through them. They're an easy read.
I'm sure. They're very quick.
Yeah.
So that's it. What about you?
I actually just really recently finished Daisy Jones and the Six, which I finally got around to reading, and I also recently finished the miniseries about it as well. It was good. This is going to be, I'm sure a lot of people will be like, Megan, but I kind of like the series better than I liked the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
There was something about, I guess, the additional detail that you, the miniseries was able to go into, and some of the differences that were created and like the tension between the characters and stuff felt more palpable, I guess, between the actors than it did to just like read it, because of course the whole novel's written in an interview format, basically, like they're writing a book basically and interviewing all the members of the band, and the show works in that way as well. However, obviously you get all of the extra scenes interspersed of the actual action that's happening and not just people talking about the action occurring. So I think that gives it a different kind of flavor.
I see. Okay.
The whole thing now has a very, like, all of it together is very super 70s vibes, very Fleetwood Mac vibes. Like, if that's your thing, like singer-songwriter stuff is your thing. The music's fucking killer. I think they wrote all of it original for the show. Wow. It's really good. And the performances in the show were incredible. Everybody was great.
And what genre would you classify it as?
Ooh, that's really tough.
Because that's why I haven't picked it up, because it's unclear what this is.
It's like, I don't even know how to describe it other than like, like general literature with almost like a documentary or mockumentary style thing to it, because it's like following a fictional band from start to finish kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I guess like that's it. I guess I found myself, and maybe it's because I was like already watching the show at the time and stuff, but I found myself less enchanted with the book as I was reading it, despite the fact that, yes, obviously it's the same story, so it's still very good. I just found that there was, I guess, more to the show, which I do get, because you're able to develop it into like a 10-episode thing instead of like a few hundred pages of a book.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if it's almost like the same thing as like, you were reading The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
Yes.
And it's the same author. And I'm wondering if we're just like maybe not vibing with her stuff.
With her writing style?
Maybe.
Because when I was reading The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I'm like, this would be great as a TV series.
Exactly. That's it. Because of the format in which it's written, I think.
Yeah.
It's something that's almost made to be turned into a TV show or a film or something like that, or adapted for the screen. So
I'm pretty sure that Netflix bought the rights to Evelyn Hugo as well. Like, so I wouldn't be surprised if they are turning it into a show.
Like, both of them are very popular books. Yeah. They've already done Daisy Jones, so I wouldn't be surprised if they were working on something to do with The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo as well. Basically, yeah, that's it. Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is very Hollywood, and this is very music industry, obviously based instead, but it's a similar style, I would say, between the two. You need to check out the show. I think you'd really like it as well.
Probably, yeah. I'll give it a go. It's on Prime, right?
It is, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, let's get into it. Shireen just pushed up her glasses like she's getting ready for quite the intellectual conversation, even though we know it's going to be ridiculous.
It's going to be garbage.
Okay. So, how do we even kick this off properly? What do you think for you when you've seen, because we're both kind of theater nerds as well to an extent. I studied theater in college for like context as well, and you've always been interested in a lot of aspects of it too. We've always read a lot of plays, watched professional performances of them and things. So I guess for you, when you go into a stage production versus a film, like what are your biggest takeaways as far as the differences between the two, like that you notice the most?
So I guess like, there's something about being, watching a play. The first thing that comes to mind is when I'm watching a play, I really, really force myself to stay awake because there are people doing it.
It feels disrespectful live.
Really disrespectful to fall asleep. Though I do find myself sometimes dozing off.
The actors in a movie will not know if you fell asleep
Exactly.
or not.
They don't care. Sorry, I digress. But, when you're watching like a theater production, what's great is that you can actually see the people on stage and you can see like the conviction and the passion that they have for the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
And so that you're watching a play. Like, that you're watching people kind of either dancing around or jumping around or just, walking around doing their thing. And it's a lot easier to kind of tell, do they have chemistry? Don't they have chemistry?
Yes.
But I find that a lot of the time they do tend to have more chemistry when you're watching a play.
I think they have no choice.
Yeah.
I think that in a theater production, I think that you are forced into such close proximity with the other people that you're doing stuff with because it creates such a different environment. You can be making a film, and I feel like to an extent, yes, I know a lot of people get very close to one another and form really good connections, but I feel like in a lot of cases it's so easy to yell cut and then walk away to your trailer type of thing versus in the world of theater, everyone's together all the time. I can't even tell you, even just in the small amount of experience that I've had with it, how much everyone is just in each other's space constantly.
And I think it's also that, like, in a movie, you can distract the audience with the extra elements that can be
from
added.
The lack of chemistry between some of the leads.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like sometimes you can be like, okay, well, like, they don't seem to really like each other, but like you have that one layer of separation with it being the camera. And then it's also that, there are special effects. There are like, nicer costumes. There's nicer sets. And when you get to the theater, sometimes depending on what you're watching, they do have to be quite creative with how they maneuver their sets.
Yeah.
With the costumes, with the changes. So you do have to use your imagination a lot more when you're at the theater.
Yeah, there's a much higher added element of suspension of disbelief. Because I believe that expression comes from theater productions in general, right? Like, we're watching a live version of Peter Pan. I don't see the wires. It's fine. Peter's flying. Fine. The kids are flying. Yeah. They're all flying together off to Neverland. I'm not seeing anything. I'm not seeing that we've gone dark between a scene change and people are running out to change set pieces. I'm not seeing it. It's fine. You can hear
them, like,
of course,
charging
like
across.
shuffling across. I'm not seeing it. It's fine. It's okay. I'm not paying attention to it. Yeah, I think that's probably like the biggest difference is that you yourself, no wonder you do, most of the time I would think you do stay awake because of that too, because you yourself are actively
focusing on
like, I'm just focusing on the story. I'm focusing on the characters that are coming out. I'm focusing on the performances that are being given.
And I think that that's to a certain extent why theater is a little bit more open to interpretation than movies are.
Sure.
Because movies, they're feeding you most of the information.
This is the story. This is what this means.
This is the character. Like, even think of like the soliloquy, for example, like that is a key part of like your Shakespeare, but a lot of your theater. Yeah. Because you need sometimes those moments to be addressing the audience,
I was actually just recently, because we're in theater month and stuff, I was, watching some things, and I recently rewatched a version of Macbeth with Michael Fassbender.
Which we will be talking about.
Yeah, spoiler alert, which we'll talk about soon. And watching it, first of all, it's cool to do that, and we'll talk about kind of like, I don't want to get into like any of the plot points or anything major like that, or like the actual film itself, but what I noticed in watching it, that I was like, you get away with this so much more in the theater than you do in a film, is that while I was watching it, it would make me almost like shake my head a little bit because there were so many points of monologue, because Shakespeare's plays are filled with monologues because, of course, that's how the actors would convey the story at the time that these were originally produced. And in a stage play, they need to speak directly to the audience because they need to convey the actual story that's occurring and what's happening with their character and the people around them. And when you watch it happen in the film, you're almost a little bit thrown off by it at certain times where they're just like, they're monologuing to no one.
Yeah.
You're kind
they're kind of muttering to themselves.
Yeah, that's it. You're like, and it doesn't, it's really well done in that film, but I have definitely seen some stuff before. Like if you watch like some of the 90s versions of certain Shakespeare adaptations, what is it? There's an adaptation, I think, of Hamlet with Mel Gibson in it.
Oh, him. No, I can't watch it.
And it's a lot. It's just like there are like some of those that you're just like, oh Jesus, this does not track for me at all. Versus none of that bothers me in a theater production. When an actor is like, that's it, either doing a little breaking of the fourth wall and like making a joke to the audience, or if they're monologuing simply to move the plot forward, I'm with it. I'm like, okay, yes, explain to me what's going on, explain to me what's happening, and it doesn't throw me off because I expect it.
Yeah, and it's their way of including the audience in the story.
It's much more immersive.
It is.
Yeah, that's
it. It really is. Yeah, and the other thing I will say is that, we've been to see some very low budget
for sure
theater.
We've been to low budget, we've been to slightly higher budget productions.
And what I will say, I always come back to, the level of passion that the actors have for what they're doing.
Yeah.
We went to see a very low budget one around Christmas, didn't we?
Was it that early in the year or something? Yeah.
And we just had a ball, didn't we?
For sure.
We
it
had
was
a great time.
A local theater, all voluntary, just people who were passionate about this, who were getting together to put on a production. And it was so fun to see that. It's so fun to see you. I find you stop caring about like the actual caliber of actor at a certain point when you're watching it, because you get, if people are having a good time with it comes through no matter what. And I think that's more easily conveyed live versus like a movie.
For sure. And like, not often I would say, and I, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm watching a movie like in a movie theater with other people. I find now more than ever movie theaters are empty. First of all.
Yeah.
Second
and
of
when
all,
they're full, you don't want to be there because everybody won't stop fucking talking.
Well, there's that, but there's not like a collective enjoyment.
Very rarely do you
like
get
it's
that.
not like you're all there like having a good time, like having a laugh and having a a shared experience.
6 of the people around you are talking or looking at their fucking phones.
Well, there's exactly. Whereas like I find that the crowds who go to the theater,
they're there for the
respectful.
Production. They're not going to start having a conversation in the middle of it. They're not going to answer their phone. They're not going to be texting people. They don't do stuff like that.
I mean, think of like a pantomime, for example. Have you ever been to a pantomime?
I haven't, no. But
you haven't?
No.
Oh, they're so good because they really get the audience involved.
Right,
Like they want you shouting out words. They want you yelling when there's like the villain is sneaking past.
The closest I've been to that is a live production of Rocky Horror, which is like that, where they had people in the audience like, screaming. Janet would come out and everybody would be like, slut. And it would, like everybody would kind of get involved, and some of the actors were sitting in the audience and would be doing some stuff like that. Because there are certain productions that are made to be, they're like pantomimes, they're made for you to participate.
Exactly. And then of course you get, the very, and I've had the privilege of going to some very high end experiences in England, where I went to the Globe Theatre and saw Dr. Faustus.
Yeah.
And that was like, it just blows you away because you're like, wow, I am watching this, and it's such a small like stage.
It's really hard to describe it because it's all almost in the round.
Yeah.
And as a general rule, like for like, or at least like the one experience I've had there, we were standing the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the tickets are dirt fucking cheap if you
Exactly. But like it's small, and so you have to really, again, suspension of disbelief.
For sure.
You have to really focus on the acting, and that's where it comes to life, especially something like Dr. Faustus, where it's all about the characters.
It's all about the characters. It's all about the dialogue.
Yeah.
A lot of like classic pieces will be like that because they really are about the character's experience and about the dialogue that's being put forth for everyone to hear. I think those are both. It's interesting because it makes like for such a different experience. Obviously, I would say, yes, chances are the biggest con of seeing a live performance versus a film version is the visuals, obviously.
Yeah.
Because, no, they don't have access to super special effects or anything of that sort. So obviously, you know, that's where your suspension of disbelief comes in a little bit more, whereas in a film, it's very easy for them to be like, yeah, this character is flying or is creating magic in some way, shape, or form for real, and we can see it, you know?
There's also that element of location, right? Like, so if you want to go see, like I just mentioned, the Globe Theatre in London, like, you have to really physically go to the location where they're going to be having the play.
Yeah.
And, like, depending on where you live, you're not always going to have, like, the pick of the best
That
productions,
option, yeah, of course.
So that is another disadvantage of the theater versus like a movie,
yeah,
right?
of course, that you have to. It's not like
production.
not like you can find your local theater and be like, oh yes, everybody will be putting on this exact show there. It doesn't work that way. It's a particular touring company is doing this in one specific area.
For sure.
So here you go and go see it, basically.
For sure. And then of course you've got Broadway where you know, you hear the actors singing and you're just like, oh my God, like you're so good.
So that I always find is a really interesting one as well, because what I find in my overall experience anyway, if I'm watching a musical on stage, it does not weird me out as much that the characters start singing as it does in a movie.
It's true, because in a movie you're like, what just happened?
It
what
feels
was that
too
transition?
close to reality, and I'm like, who the fuck just starts singing for no reason? Whereas with theater, because you're already expecting more of that sense of whimsy, like you mentioned before, I think that when it happens, you're like, okay, yeah,
cool.
I'm
Let's
fine with
just
it.
bust out into song.
Let's bust into song. Let's listen to this person belt out these particular notes and stuff, and you just kind of roll with it.
It's so true. Like, I went to see Kinky Boots on Broadway in New York last summer, and like, it was fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm sure it wasn't weird.
It wasn't weird at all. Like, I'm thinking of, you know, probably the most famous song, "The Sex Is in the Heel," you know,
right,
and, you know, they just kind of start singing it like halfway through the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, it like, you know, they're having a conversation. They're saying, well, you know, the boot has to be red. Well, why red? This is burgundy. This is not red, you know? And then she starts singing, and you're just like, this is awesome.
Yeah,
you know?
and whereas, like, you know, that's it. If you're watching a movie and in the middle of a conversation, one of the characters just starts singing, you're like, I mean,
okay. Like, they could have done that better, given that it's a movie. Like, you're a lot more critical with it being a movie, too,
you're a lot more likely to criticize a lot of aspects of it, I think, versus, that's it. In the stage production, you're like, sure, yeah, no, I totally, I'm with this. You know, there are only certain types of movie musicals where I feel like it doesn't bother me. And it's just probably because as a whole, the film is just really good. So I like it, and I'm fine with all of those aspects of it as well. But overall, I find like if I'm going to see a musical, it's kind of more fun to see it on stage. There's just something about it that is more logical,
for sure.
I think.
For sure.
Yeah. And this is not like, I shouldn't even have to say this because the number of movies that we talk about on this fucking podcast, but like, we like movies. It's not like I'm shitting all over them just because I am.
We're just doing a comparison of theater versus movie.
Yeah. As a comparison, I find that in certain cases, a film works really well because in some cases, if something's just very dramatic and isn't something that as a story, as a play is necessarily, if it's mostly dialogue, if it's mostly just character interactions and not anything supernatural in any way, or doesn't have any element of like magic or whimsy to it, if it's just like a character study, yes, it can be incredible to see that on stage, but you can also do that in a film without it being, bad.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I went to see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and it was the shortened version one, because originally, for anybody FYI, originally when they released this in London, it was a 2-part. Quite long, like 2 times 3 hours, if I'm not mistaken. God. And so they've whittled it down to, I think, 4 hours total or 3 hours total. Okay, but like one performance, yeah. And I do have to say they did a really good job with like the magical effects of that one. There's one where they like, the flu powder, they do that, where they disappear like through the wall, kind of. There's another one, there's another thing that they do at some point on there, and it's, you're like impressed with how they thought of doing it.
Right.
So I think it's also the creativity that has to go into it,
Yeah, because you know that it's just like, it's like, doing it in a film is one thing, but you can hide things so much better. But when you're doing it on a stage, there's so much that goes into it. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not going to applaud anything else for it, you're going to applaud the fact that these actors are up there live doing something. They don't get more than one take. You don't get to call cut and be like, oh no, that one wasn't great. Can we do it again?
Yeah.
You don't get to do that. People are in the middle of it. If you flub a line, forget a line, don't deliver something the way that you wanted it to, well,
you gotta make it work.
You gotta just push through and keep going and cover for yourself. Other people can cover for you.
Yep.
Whatever needs to happen to just move the production forward and not keep things like, stalled for too long, basically.
And like, it's such a, like we say it about actors, trying to make it in Hollywood and stuff, but like the theater is ruthless, like,
oh my God. And like, I think that Hollywood is the way that it is because theater was the way that it is to begin with.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like all the harsh criticism, all of the things that you see people experiencing in like the Hollywood sphere. Yeah, guess what? They got that shit when they were trying to get on Broadway in the first place. And they got that from their theater teachers.
Yep.
Who treated people like terribly because they were unhappy with, I don't know, probably their own lives. I speak from experience.
Yeah.
At least to a degree, so if you think that someone is like, when you realize that certain people who, let's say, primarily act in film are also able to do things on Broadway, you're like, okay, so you're telling me this person can act, sing, and dance.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to do all of it. So that's like a triple threat. That person, I'm like, that person's an actor. That is someone who can do pretty much anything.
For sure. I mean, I got to give a shout out to last year when I was in New York City. I went into the Harry Potter store that's there, and I went over to somebody who worked there, and I was asking him about the different types of wands.
Oh, yeah.
And he started to sing them out to me.
Oh, my God.
Like, in a very Broadway kind of style, and I just was, like very alarmed by this. Yeah. And I was like, sir, like, please stop. Like, you're really drawing attention to this interaction. And I'm like, do you work on Broadway or something? And he's like, no, but I would love to work on Broadway. Can you get me on Broadway? Wow. And I was like, oh dear.
Okay. But this is the kind of like big personality that you have to have to be able to, first of all, develop like a kind of a thick skin, but also to be able to make yourself stand out versus all of the other people trying out for the exact same part forever.
Yep. It's gotta be tough.
Yeah. I love a theater production. I don't really care if it's like a small time production, if it's like, if there's more actual production value to it because it's got a bigger budget, if it's somewhere in the middle, I'm happy with any of it. Really, I'm just happy to see a live production because I just find it something that's like kind of disappeared more and more over the years, and we just don't get as much of it in our day-to-day lives as we should.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you guys think of theater? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Have you never seen a theater production in your entire life? You went to see a play when you were in school. I don't believe that you didn't. Yeah. Everybody did at some point.
Go see something.
Yeah. And if you haven't, take a look like in your area, in your city. Maybe you have something close by, like, or some like even small time theater troupe who are just either passing through or do this for fun. It's nice to go and support like local theater troupes and stuff like that as well, people who are just passionate about what they're doing. But you guys can let us know about that over on Instagram at fullybookedca. You can check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/bookwaswaybetter. And if you are still here with us, which I hope you are, please feel free to leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening, because it really helps us get the show out in front of more people. Until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.